Okay, so you're native St. Louis?
That's right, born and raised.
Good. What part of town?
North St. Louis.
Okay.
Grew up right off of Van de Venner, near Van de Venner Natural Bridge,
All
right
right.
by Beaumont High School.
Okay. And
Yeah.
you wrote for the Post-Dispatch here?
Yeah, I started off writing for St. Louis American and for the old Take 5 magazine.
Oh yeah. Sylvester Brown.
Yeah, I was possibly his first writer, but if not his first, one of the first two or three.
Okay.
And did the American, and eventually made my way to the Post-Dispatch.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then and now you're where, in Washington?
Yeah, I'm at the Washington Post. I've been there about 10 and a half years. I'm deputy editor of the book review section. It's called Book World.
Okay. Now you yourself just recently wrote a book. It's been getting a lot of notoriety in press.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the book
Sure.
and why you wrote the book.
Well, it's called The N-Word. Who can say it, who shouldn't, and why? And I was primarily motivated by curiosity. You know, it's such a volatile word. Our reactions to it tend to be very volatile. Mine as well. But I wasn't always sure why. You know, the elders in our community always said, well, you need to know, you know, the history of the word. You wouldn't use the word if you knew the history of the word. But they never really said what that history was. And it was just a forbidden word in my household coming up. But again, no explanation. We just did what my father said. He said, don't say this word. So that was the end of it. So I wanted to get some of the history behind that and capture it and condense it and put it between covers. So that's what I set out to do.
So what is the history of the word? I know you wrote an entire book about it, so in 100 words or less.
Yeah, no, word has been around for a long time, but I was particularly interested in tracing its use in the United States. So I went back to its earliest instances, and you know, our ancestors arrived in 1619. That's when the first 20 African captives arrived. They arrived at the Jamestown colony, and John Rolfe was a colonist there, and his job was to record the comings and goings. And he used the N-word to describe the arrival of those 20 Africans via a Dutch man of war. Now it's significant to me because this is 1619, but as early as 1550, we're already using Negro to describe Africans. We're using Africans to describe Africans. So this is something different.
Now, in what context did he use the word? Was it as a noun or as an adjective?
Now,
As a noun. Okay.
local color.
It is. It is. Okay, so you yourself, when you were growing up in North St. Louis, you never used the word as a youth.
Right, that's right. We weren't allowed to, but then also in the community, you know, I was growing up right after the Civil Rights Movement, and Black consciousness and Black power were really popular throughout the culture. So what I heard, say, teenage boys or adult Black men saying, they usually said, "What it is, brother? What's up, brother? What's happening, brother?" Brother was the word back then. You know, it wasn't the N-word. So that's what I was acculturated to. That's what I was socialized to say.
Okay.
And that's what I envisioned, you know, my future would be. I didn't envision a future in which I would hear the N-word exchanged in that same manner.
Okay. How old are you?
I'm 45.
You're 45. I'm 29,
Okay.
and I grew up in North St. Louis as well. And I think that probably, I would imagine in the same context that you all use brother, we use the N-word.
Right.
And so what do you, obviously it's changed in modern culture where the word is used much more frequently and more loosely even. You know, if we sit on the street long enough, we'll probably hear some you know, group of people walk by and use it. What, in your book, what do you say about that cultural shift?
I lament it. I condemn it. I think it's a backwards move for African Americans. I think that the word is so permanently attached to notions of white supremacy and this idea that we are unfit for inclusion in American society and therefore not entitled to the rights and privileges that citizenship conveys is reason enough for us not to use the word. I also think it's a form of laziness, that there are plenty of other words to describe friendship or affection or mutual respect between men. And I think any of those words work better.
Do you think that maybe, you know, it's funny how this has really become part of the national discussion right now, following the whole IMS thing. You know, one, I'm still a little curious about how that links to, you know, hip hop and the N-word directly.
Sure.
But do you think that maybe just over the past couple of decades, the culture has just loosened up with curse words in general?
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
I remember when, even just over the course of my short days, I remember that the B word, bitch, was used a lot differently. And now, you know, you can flip through commercials and darn near hear it on commercials.
Yeah.
So do you think that that word, perhaps the N-word, is being singled out right now in a larger scope of cultural relaxation?
Well, I don't think so, because actually when I do readings and book signings, what you have raised always comes up. There are always women who come up and say, we're having this debate about the B word. And sometimes the debate breaks out in the audience between the women. And I'm just kind of sitting there going, you know. So I think you're closer to the point when you talk about this general coarsening of the conversation and people responding to it. There's no question the N-word is just one word in that larger context. We're re-examining language and how Americans talk to each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
In your book, you talk about how in different contexts it means, or it may not be, I guess, as bad. For instance, in artistic or educational.
Right.
Do you include rap music in that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there are rap performers who use the word very astutely. And when we're talking about rappers who abuse the word, who use it poorly, gratuitously, we're actually talking about a small subset of rappers. So I think we have to always be careful and not buy into these discussions that outsiders to our community bring to it when they say, well, what about these rappers? You know, it's just a certain group of rappers. You know, I talk about Mos Def, Common, Public Enemy, Lauryn Hill. I mean, there are lots of rappers who use the N-word. I use it very astutely. So I don't think because some rappers use it foolishly that we should say all rappers need to stop using this word. I don't think that's a cool-headed reaction.
So I take it you don't buy into the this popular thought that maybe the word should just be banned. I know locally, the Roberts brothers, who own several radio stations across the country, just made a policy decision to not play music on their stations that use derogatory or language like that.
Yeah, well, I think that's a separate issue. I think they own a company, and I think as proprietors, as business owners, it's your prerogative to decide what you want to run. And if you decide this is not a good business practice for me to include this kind of material, you're certainly within your rights to do so. But in the larger society, I'm not in favor of bans of words. You know, I don't think you should be fined $50 if you use it on the street, as was proposed in Texas. I think you should be discouraged, but I don't think it's about law. I don't think you can legislate proper behavior. I think you can only encourage it. There has to be room for individual rights in there. It's within your rights to say, I disagree with you, Jabari, and I'm going to use this word all the time. I still think you're wrong, but you know, I'm not going to go to court and sue you. Yeah.
So you, just going back here, you do think that the use of the word is negative in many instances. What do you think the consequences are of it?
Well, I think that as long as racism exists, the word will have certain negative connotations that hold black people back. And I think we have an obligation to use language that moves us forward. So one of the things that I'm interested in looking at is the ways that white supremacy affects not just the behavior of white people, but how it affects us. You know, this is what Du Bois talked about when he talked about the terrible two-ness that all African Americans confront. You know, one eyeball, if you will, is viewing the world as a proud, defiant African American, saying I belong here. But this other eyeball, we're looking at the world through the eyes of people who have traditionally despised us. And these kind of conflict in how we behave. One way they conflict is in language. And for most of its existence, the N-word has been synonymous with subhuman. And that we can rationalize calling each other subhuman as a form of endearment, to me, is evidence of white supremacy's effect on how we think and behave and interact with each other.
Okay. I wonder how your book concludes. Where do we go from here?
I think it begins with individuals, you know. I think, I hope that the book is a stepping off point to a larger conversation about civility, decency, mutual respect. You know, the country used to have this tradition of constructive dissent, where I can disagree with you all day, but I don't talk about your mama, and you don't talk about mine, and I don't call you names, and you don't call me names. As soon as you call me names, you know, this wall goes up. I don't hear anything else you have to say. So if you come to me respectfully and say, you know, I read your book, and you know, I would do this differently, I think that's absolutely fine, because that's civil. And so I think we need to take the initiative to have civil exchanges with each other. Stop letting the conversation go to the level of the gutter, because no ideas are exchanged then. So I don't learn and I don't grow, and neither do you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for taking some time out, and welcome home. I hope you get to spend some time with your family.
My pleasure. It's good to be back in the Louis.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right.